We'll go to the Bengals and grade them quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defense looking forward for your Dynasty fantasy football needs. The Bengals are the only AFC North team that missed the playoffs, but make no mistake, this team is exciting on paper. There is plenty of talent here. Looking forward, we've got a lot to be excited about if, and I mean if, everybody can stay healthy. Why do I really emphasize health? Probably because the quarterback situation was real interesting this year, but it did not bring down the grade a whole lot. I've got A-. A little worried about Joe Burrow getting hurt for the second time in 4 years, I believe. But Jake Browning, he filled in nicely. 2 concerns. 1, injuries with Burrow, we can now classify them as recurring. We've had 2 over a pretty short period of time. I would really get worried if he got hurt in the future. Second concern, I think Jake Browning found himself a job somewhere else. Joe Burrow's pretty young. First few years in the league, if he stays healthy, he'll have a long career there. If he does stay healthy, Browning is not going to want to sit behind him for a decade. He could go somewhere else. I don't know how soon. You've got A. We're both big fans of this situation, but you're a tick above me here.
Yeah, I love that Burrow would be back next season, and Burrow is just solid with production. We know that. But Browning, he didn't devalue that offense at all. In my eyes, if you have 2 quarterbacks that can run an offense without skipping a beat is a huge plus. And I think that it's a tell on the style of offense that the Bengals have more than who's at that quarterback position.
Right. And one thing I really did like in one of the first games for Browning, first 5 plays, I believe he was 5 for 5, and it was his second start or his first full game. I'm not sure. Some prime time. I forget who they were playing against. He goes 5 for 5 and throws for like 15 yards. What does that say to you? Screens, right? It looked ugly. It was a weird cluster of plays in that first 15 plays, the game script, if you will, that the coach puts out. But guess what happened after that? He looked real comfortable. You'd be shocked at how much a quarterback's confidence skyrockets when you give them those high percentage throw opportunities. And it was off to the races from there. Yeah, we can give credit to the play calling, but like you said, Dylan, the fact of the matter is, Joe Burrow goes down. This offense really didn't miss a beat. They finished with a good record. They just barely missed the playoffs. The main issue was health across the board in different positions that we'll go over in a second. But yeah, props to Jake Browning. I don't think, especially from what we saw this year, that you can find me 32 quarterbacks in the NFL that are better than him. I'm curious to see if he leaves the nest. That's kind of why I have the A-. If he stays there, you've got a great 1-2 punch at quarterback. Not that you need one with somebody like Burrow, but you've got a surplus of talent there. Running backs, pretty dang impressed with what we've had over the course of the last few years with someone as stable, as healthy, as consistent, as reliable. Insert reliable synonym here. This guy is middle of the road, going to give you what you want. Production out of Joe Mixon. 37 touchdowns in total in the last 3 years from Joe Mixon. More involved as a pass-catching back as of late. He's kind of evolved as we've seen the running back position see more of those like LaShawn McCoys or Alvin Kamara's or Christian McCaffrey's. He originally was kind of ground and pound and then went to that dump-off pass type of back, avoiding contact. He also gets the benefit, if we're looking at the last few years, of being on a winning team. Team's up, they're going to run the ball more, and we've seen that a lot. He doesn't jump off the page, but my favorite part about him, he's just good enough, and he doesn't get hurt. So I've got A-, you've got B+.
Yeah, Mixon is a dog. Everything you want in a running back. Can run and catch the ball. And I was struggling grading this because I'm such a huge Joe Mixon supporter and a huge fan of it.
Sure.
And you look at his numbers in the last 3 years, and they're incredible. 29 rushing touchdowns, 8 receiving touchdowns, and then 89 total yards a game. But the downside is age. Mixon is heading into age 28. They don't really use a double back feature. He's kind of like the lead back in that offense. So it's kind of like, okay, he's taking a lot of hits. He's getting older. What's going to happen in the future?
Right. There is only reason I know his backup is because he did go to Illinois and he had like 1 or 2 nice games this year. But to your point, Dylan, we haven't seen a lot of him. Chase Brown, stud in college. Very limited sample size this year. You know, I bring up age a lot, but I didn't do it here. Good on you for recognizing Joe Mixon has been around for a while. 28 can sometimes be the twilight of somebody's career in that position. I think in order for us to feel more confident and elevate this to like an A, because we've got the tools, we've got a great supporting cast, and what we're about to go over in wide receivers, we've got a great quarterback, we've got a team that wins football games, so you're going to run it in the fourth quarter. The environment's there, but the RB1 in Cincy is getting up there in age. I think we really, in 2024, need to figure out what the case is on Chase Brown. Do we have a talented fill-in guy who can replace what I think is one of the more replaceable positions? We're going to find out if it's replaceable in Cincinnati. Big shoes to fill after Joe Mixon. Wide receiver, I mean, holy cow. This is a candidate, depth-wise, the best 1, 2, 3 punch. That's not really a phrase, but we're going to use it here because it applies to Cincy in the league. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. As far as I'm concerned, I just named off 3 potential wide receiver ones if you throw them on other teams. I personally think you throw Tyler Boyd, especially with his experience, on the Ravens right now, he rivals Zay Flowers for the wide receiver 1 spot. And there's a limited amount of situations. You go to T. Higgins, I think he takes more jobs. You go to Jamar Chase, we're talking top 5. Chase, obviously, from wide receiver university, LSU, has got that connection with Burrow that helps. My one gripe, and it kind of goes with this whole team, the reason they didn't make the playoffs, we saw some injuries this year. So you have an A as well. Impressive wide receiving core we have on our hands here.
Yeah, it's really a solid 1 through 3 with Chase, Higgins, and Boyd. The downside is that Chase is injury prone. We've seen Boyd go down a few times. Higgins sometimes goes down. That injury devalues it just a tad. But the real reason I'm not at an A+ here is because Higgins and Boyd are both upcoming free agents, and the wide receiver room could change.
That is fair. That's an aspect we're going to bring up in these videos, folks, that free agency is a thing. We brought up Kirk Cousins in past moments before. Spots are going to change. The team you saw evolve in front of you this year is not going to be the team next year. And in the case of the Bengals, not just because Joe Burrow is hopefully going to be healthy in the future. There is a demand there, and you've got to wonder, what is T. Higgins' agent saying right now? What is Tyler Boyd's agent saying right now about, I could ship these guys off somewhere else and they'll be the primary or secondary option. What are you going to do to make sure they stay here and succeed, especially in a place in Cincinnati where they love to throw the ball around under Zach Taylor? We'll go to the tight ends. Kind of a direct contrast. We don't really see much tight end usage here. Have nice little stretches. We were kind of joking about this before, like, who's on this team from a fantasy perspective? You have a lot of production out of the quarterbacks, whether it's Burrow or Browning. You have a lot of production out of your reliable running back. We got to think of a backup plan for Mixon. Maybe Chase Brown is somebody you want to look for in dynasty leagues. Wide receiving core, I'll put up with anybody, especially depth-wise. Tight ends, nobody with over 400 receiving yards. You hear the term streaming option, where you're going to pick somebody up every week off the waiver wire and play that game, which we're getting more and more into a market where you need to do that for tight ends as the established names are getting older and more injury prone. There's not even that here. I mean, the focus may shift with what you said before. Higgins, Boyd hitting the free agent market. But as things stand right now, I'm not messing with Cleveland tight ends. There's no need to. You've got D+. Well, yeah, what do you got on this kind of invisible position right now in Cincy?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I couldn't name the tight end off the top of my head. I had no idea who it was. And I looked it up for this, and it's Tanner Hudson and Drew Sample.
Couple nice
Drew Sample, I remember the name Drew Sample a little bit, but those are the top guys in the depth chart, and yikes, that's the top guys. But I wouldn't be surprised if they let Higgins and Boyd go and they go after a tight end in free agency. Otherwise, tight end may be a position you need to draft. It's just, it can only go up. It can only go up for the Bengals, right?
That is fair. And there's certain situations, right, where there's a new name. You see a Tanner Hudson, or you see a Drew Sample, for those of you who didn't recognize him when he came in the league with a pretty good scouting report. And sometimes it's good to learn new names. Tucker Kraft has been pretty fantasy relevant the last few weeks, and you could even say Luke Musgrave as well. I'll bring in your examples with the Packers, right? Those are names, Isaiah Likely in Baltimore. We're going to have to learn them, because when they're in there, they're being utilized. The problem in Cincinnati is these guys are in there, and they're not being utilized because of Tyler Boyd, because of Jamar Chase, because of T. Higgins. Is that going to look different in the future? with those guys being free agents, Boyd and Higgins, I think that's where our hope lies. If that wide receiver depth and our grade as a result goes down, maybe the potential for tight end usage goes up. We'll have to see if Burrow does that. Burrow really likes to sling it, throw outside the numbers. This is a spread out offense. I don't know. This is kind of an invisible position. Like, Dylan and I legitimately had to do some digging to see what kind of contributions we got out of these tight ends, because there's not a whole lot of you out there who are reaching for this, unless you're in some exotic 16-team double tight end format. A 12-team standard PPR format is not a place where you're going to hear a whole lot of people talking about the tight end play in Cincinnati. So with that, we will go to the defense. Yikes. Yeah, if there's one weak suit, this is 1B. Slightly better rating on your end. You got C-. I've got a D. The top was taken off of this defense. That's the excuse I will give them. So you have Von Bell, backside safety, gone, Panthers. And then you've got Jesse Bates off of the Falcons. So both got shipped off to the NFC South, actually. That's not the sole reason for this, but if you do look at this team as a summary of this year, those are significant losses. When you have a defense that's giving up 248 passing yards per game, that's the 5th most in the league. This team had to get in a lot of shootouts, and they're pretty dang lucky they had a compatible quarterback with a strong wide receiving core that was kind of healthy at some moments to be able to scrape out the amount of wins they had. If they didn't have that, they'd probably have a better draft pick right now. But in general, you have a team that needs to score a lot of points to win. You're not the biggest fan either, but you're giving them a little more credit than I am.
Yeah, they get a C- in my book. There's no real standouts on defense. They're just an okay group of guys, a tad below average. Basically is what I'm saying. When you think of Bengals, you don't think defense. You don't think of defense. You think of offense. They're so offensive heavy. And you're going to need that in the AFC with teams like the Bills and Kansas City. But the only issue is that they don't have a defense. And that's kind of why I'm hesitant to put it lower, just because they can compete. They weren't bad by all means this year, but they're just not over that average mark or above average where they had a good enough record to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, you'll look at a lot of statistical categories from this year, and you'll see this team is bottom half. I do agree. The fact that they had a backup quarterback in there, some credit goes to Jake Browning for sure. But in general, this team is built to get in shootouts, and they want to win more than they lose, like any other team. That's how they play their ball. You got to put up 30 to really give yourself a legitimate shot, to put a Band-Aid on this thing and say, all right, it wasn't pretty, but we got it done. Yeah, I mean, you don't have an investment in the 2 defensive backs that left in Bates and Bell. They apparently were asking for too much. And this team in general, where have their first rounders been? Where has their money been? It's been on the offense. It's been Joe Burrow. It's been Jamar Chase. It's been keeping Higgins around, and we'll see what we have now with Boyd as well. There's not a great prioritization. And from a fantasy perspective, I have no reason to invest in a team that not only gives up a lot of points, but scores a lot of points. I want nothing to do with that defense, because now, if a team puts up 21, the problem is the Bengals are not putting up 3. The Bengals are putting up 21 or 20, and now that other offense is like, well, we're not done. We're going to put up 30, 40, 50, and that's a nightmare in fantasy. Whereas if you had a bad offense, you could make the claim that, oh, maybe the backups will come in, and, this isn't the best option, but maybe this team will take their foot off the gas pedal. We have learned time and time again with the Bengals, you can't really do that. They're an offense that's going to compete. On the flip side, if you looked at a team like the Commanders with Sam Howell, horrible defense, well, we know you got to throw it a lot. This is the opposite. You don't want to mess with this defense, because the offense is going to force the other team to keep their foot on the gas pedal. Yeah, I would avoid defense. And we look at this team in general, pretty sharp drop-off. I've got 3 A's and then a pair of D's when we look at the invisible tight end play and defense. For Dylan, a couple A's, a B speckled in there, a D+, and a C. The weakness definitely in the defense. This is one I would avoid unless you're in an exotic league format. Again, 16-team, double defense. I really hope that does not exist for the sake of all of you. But if that is a thing, tight end, we want to watch, considering the wide receiver free agency situation with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. So Bengals, solid team all around. They're in a tough division. The main reason they were not in, injuries. And if there's a secondary reason, it's that defense that gives up way too many points. Good luck, Cincy. Invest in the defense. Otherwise, very bright future, exciting team that scores a lot of points.